Order, order. I call Paul Scully to move the motion.
I beg to move that this House has considered the political situation in Burma, and I'd like to, it's great privilege and an honour to serve under your chairmanship, Mr. Owen, again. Burma is a nation at a crossroads. There are huge challenges that we face as over there, but there's many reasons to be optimistic. I was fortunate to go recently on a visit with Benedict from Christian Solidarity Worldwide. Benedict is an absolute fount of knowledge on Burma, and Christian Solidarity Worldwide, as well as being a fantastic advocate for human rights and religious tolerance, is a really amazing source of information for that part of the world, as well as other parts of the world. I have a personal interest because my father was born in Burma. My grandfather was actually born in Mandalay, and during World War II, he served on the docks, actually scuttling the docks so the Japanese couldn't get in and use anything there. My father, when I visited, I actually found out that when he was 13 in 1952, he was actually walking past as a schoolboy the Secretariat the day that General Aung San was assassinated. So imagine as a 13-year-old boy seeing the chaos and the aftermath of what was going on, not really knowing quite what a pivotal moment that was in the country's history at the time. My aunt, in 1962, during the coup, was at Rangoon University as a tutor when the student union was blown up, and she lost many of her friends and colleagues that day and lost her job. For the next 2 years, she had to work unpaid at the general's behest, doing whatever they wanted, including chanting up and down the streets to pretend that they had far more support than they actually did. And so it was an absolute privilege and an honour for me in 2016 to have another little chapter, tiny chapter of my personal family's history at another pivotal moment in the country's history, the transition, the government after the 2015 elections, the transition to what we hope is going to be a far more open and fairer and freer democracy. But it was more than just a personal episode of Who Do You Think You Are? Thanks to Ben, I was able to crisscross the country and meet a number of people to talk about religious tolerance, to talk about human rights, to talk about ethnic conflicts. But I also met a number of national and regional MPs, and I joined an international delegation in Naypyidaw, which included honourable members for Norwich North, my honourable friend who's in a place here, the honourable members for Sheffield Hillsborough and Enfield North, who I know both wanted to participate in this debate, but unfortunately they have events elsewhere. And this international delegation helped to train the new MPs. And actually one thing that was uncovered there was the first little basic risk for the future, and that's the capacity of the newly elected politicians. They've worked so hard and they've given up so much to be elected, but they need the knowledge and the direction to be effective at drafting and scrutinising legislation, to challenge ministers, whilst still dealing with their constituency work to the best of their ability. That's something that we here take for granted. Because when I was elected, I had support from really experienced clerks, staff, doormen and colleagues. I stepped into a mature system with people who could guide me smoothly on the way. But with a system previously run by a military junta, this barely exists in Naypyidaw. The opportunity to scrutinise is certainly very, very new. Mr. Speaker has also been to Burma with Ben Rogers, and as former chairman of the Burma APPG, has already given a lot of support with the promise of more. There are clerks actually experienced that are working over there, British parliamentary clerks that are working over there, seconded over there, really sharing our knowledge, which is fantastic. And delegations of Burmese clerks have visited here as well. I look at the new MPs, and I think most people, when I look at my campaign to get to this place after 2.5 years of a hard-fought election, people say, Paul, you really worked very hard. And I have to look in awe at, I basically did a lot of simple things many, many times over a period of a couple of years. These people have given up so much. My old sales manager used to describe commitment to me. He used to liken it to an English breakfast. He said the chicken that actually gave the egg was mildly interested, whereas the pig that gave the bacon was totally committed. Yeah. And I think, when you look at these MPs and what they've actually given up is remarkable. They're eager, they're chomping on the bit, but it is important for them to focus. There is a huge weight of expectation. and that needs managing. That will be in a parliamentary structure, that will be in a party structure as well for each of the parties. But most people, most Burmese people, they are tolerant, they are understanding, but they're determined. But they know that they can't change things overnight. But with a vision and determination and a framework, things can change. Aung San Suu Kyi is an incredible woman, but she can't do everything on her own, which is why that framework is going to be incredibly important. They need to enable MPs to get their balance right between working for their country in terms of getting the rule of law and getting this legislation and changes in place, but also their constituency work and a family balance as well, which is very difficult in the current situation in Naypyidaw. But frankly, that extraordinary parliamentary building, which you may have seen on the internet, on television or whatever like that, it is something to behold. Even Ceausescu, I think, would be quite amazed if he actually saw the extent to of this building. Frankly, it's big enough to give MPs a desk and somewhere to work to do their constituency work. Not all these changes, this framework needs a lot of money, which obviously Burma doesn't have a lot of at the moment. The election observers that I met while I was over there, they actually did see a number of cases of fraud, of intimidation, of threats of violence. So it wasn't a perfect election by any stretch of the imagination, but it was as good as can be expected, and it certainly got the result. I don't think anybody could be in doubt that it got the result that the majority, the vast majority of the country wanted to see. So in that regard, it was a good result, and it was as free and a fair election as we could expect. I'd asked the Minister what more we can do to support the politicians. We are obviously not going to be telling them what to do, how to run their country, but I'd ask him what more we can do as parliamentarians and as a British government to support politicians as they move into this transition of parliamentary democracy that we take for granted here in this country. You'd have seen that that the military have been under considerable negotiations with Daw Suu in terms of the presidency, in terms of what happens with the constitution. U Tin Chaw, a close ally of Daw Suu, has now been appointed as president, which is to be welcomed. But the approval of the military's choice for vice president, Myint Sray, is difficult for many to swallow. He's a hardliner. He's the military commander that was actually supervised the crackdown on the Saffron Revolution in 2007. He was a close confidant of Than Shwe. Ironically, his son-in-law actually held Australian citizenship, which actually prevented him from taking up the vice presidency in 2012 under the same rules that prevented Daw Suu taking up the presidency. But reportedly, the son-in-law has now renounced his citizenship. As first vice president, Myint Sray has a seat on the 11-member National Security and Defence Council and would serve as acting president should the presidency fall vacant for any reason. So obviously, as I say, we need to make sure that although the transition is looking very optimistic and there's a lot of reasons to look forward to what is to come, there are threats, there are situations which may arise which can bring Burma, as has happened in the past, back to the terrible dark times that we've seen. So we must err on the side of caution as well. And when you move out of Naypyidaw, as I did, we still have to look at what's going on in terms of religious tolerance, in terms of ethnic conflict. If I start with religious tolerance, I met a number of Muslim leaders and campaigners, King Mong Min, YY New, Al-Hajj U Ai Luin, the first two being Rohingya representatives. YY New was a phenomenally articulate 29-year-old. Her father had been an MP, but he wasn't able to stand as an MP this time round because he no longer was a citizen of Burma because of the citizenship rules. YY New, as many people that I met, despite being 29, had already served 7 years in prison with her family, purely pretty well for being the daughter of a former MP and an activist. It seemed that the people that I met, albeit obviously a self-selecting community because of the human rights and religious tolerance aspect of my visit, had all singularly been to prison for 14 years, 18 years, was not extraordinary for the people that I met, although those people were very extraordinary. YY was telling me that the policy of the government towards Rohingya in the past had led to hatred and discrimination amongst the community as a whole. But despite the severity of the situation, more Burmese people are becoming more open than before, and misunderstandings about the Rohingya can and must be addressed. She looked at the fact that that they would need to amend the 1982 citizenship law, look at amending the indigenous and national races list, or grant citizenship for those whose parents were citizens before 1982. And the internally displaced people in that area, their major problem is healthcare, especially women. They're not allowed to go to hospital freely. They need permission, they have to pay bribes, and often even when they're in hospital, they're treated pretty inhumanely. A lot of the source of the religious tensions has been down to Mabata, quite a militant nationalist, very politicized group of Buddhist monks. And this is still, although they have been supported by the previous government, and which we will hope now will wither on the vine now that Dorsu is in charge, we still have one of their leaders, U Wiratu, a radical monk, who's released a new trailer for an anti-Muslim video with the promise of actually releasing the full video. But the new chairman of Mabata, Insane Sayadaw, the suggestion that he may be more flexible because he's a former political prisoner himself and he has a good understanding of politics. But we need to continue to hear the voice, not just of the moderates, but of people like Cardinal Bo, people like Bishop Philip in Lasho, and the Venerable Bhadata Saindita, from, also known as Asia Light, the extraordinary name of Asia Light, who is a Buddhist monk from Pien Uluin. And he speaks out in a very, very vociferous way, really speaking out about the true meaning of Buddhism. Because whenever I hear the word militant Buddhism and nationalist Buddhism, the two words just do not go together. The Burmese people are the most peaceful, tolerant in general terms, placid people, albeit very determined. And they really exude all the qualities that you would expect from a mainly Buddhist population. So it's extraordinary to actually see the extremities that Mabata will go to divide their population. Christians have not been exempted from religious intolerance as well. They've not been allowed to build churches in certain areas. They've told they're not even able to worship in their own homes in certain situations. I actually went to Lashio in Northern Shan as well, Northern Shan State, looking at ethnic conflict. I think I'm the first MP to have gone up there. There's some worrying developments in Kachin State. There's obviously drugs are rife up in that area. They believe that a huge percentage of young people up in Northern Shan are addicted to drugs as part of a deliberate policy in many respects by the military up there. And human trafficking into China is common with little action. I met with representatives for the Ta'ang community, a women's organisation there, and the Students and Youth Organisation Union there. There's a 1 million Ta'ang people in northern and southern Shan State. But we discussed conflict which has recently begun between the Ta'ang National Liberation Army and the Restoration Council of Shan State. After the ceasefire was concluded, the RCSS signed it and went around Shan State to explain it. But when they entered TNLA-controlled territory, clashes between the two armed groups began. And there's allegations that the RCSS are trying to extend the territory, but also suggestions that the military may be stoking that conflict to divide. So this is something that we need to make sure, because whilst things in Naypyidaw are being, hopefully being sorted and opened up, Burma's a big country. There's a lot of ethnic states around, each with their own values, their own conflicts, their own tensions, and it's very, very difficult from someone in the centre to be able to get to grips with all of that. The rule of law was a phrase that kept coming up time and time again from every politician that I spoke to. And there are a number of legal cases that we met with solicitors and other advocates for, which I just wanted to raise briefly. There's Niranjan Rasalingam, a British citizen who's been in prison for 14 months without charge. And he was actually accused of a cash point scam, along with 2 other Indian nationals who weren't even in the country at the time or that the crime was supposed to have been committed. I know he's actually, Niranjan Rasalingam is actually a constituent of my honourable friend from Croydon Central, who I know has taken up that case himself. We met with the solicitor who was dealing with the case of a rape and murder of 2 Kachin school teachers on the night of the 19th of January 2015. Their bodies were found in a village 140 miles from Lashio. Investigators were only able to reach the village 1 month after the incident. They could interview some villagers, but none of the 48 soldiers stationed nearby. We saw some harrowing photos. We saw photos of their dead and mutilated bodies where their hands had been slashed to the bone, ostensibly with machetes, we believe possibly by military, to check they weren't just playing dead. That's how brutal and savage these killings are. And for this not to be investigated properly is an absolute scandal. We met Robert Sang Ong, who's dealing with U Gambira, a former Buddhist monk who was a leader of the Saffron Revolution and an outspoken voice for religious freedom. He was arrested on his return to Burma for illegal entry. And there were many other cases as well. People were simply getting 6 and 9 month prison sentences for sharing stories on Facebook and things like that. Now, the rule of law, to me, as I say, when you're looking at especially outlying areas, there are too many cases that were coming up at the time where people are talking about police using their power of arrest for their own influence, judicial corruption, constitutional abuse. Really, power needs to be exercised out in the villages and towns to open this up. We heard from a civil activist saying that democracy has only reached the upper levels, the regional and township levels, but we need to reach the local levels and elect local leaders. Now, just in conclusion,
thank the member for giving way and congratulate him on securing the debate. He just touched there on the issue I wanted to ask him about, which was democracy having reached the upper levels in terms of the Burmese people. Would he agree with me that it is absolutely essential that the Burmese people at the ground level see the benefits of the move and the transition and need to see the assistance of the West in trying to deliver on the ground democracy and tolerance and respect for all of them?
Scully.
The honourable member makes an absolutely vital point. Daw Sue herself is very insistent for our MPs to work in their constituencies to make sure that they're out seeing, working for the people that elected them. But as the honourable member says, it's very important that I know DFID are doing a lot of work on democracy building and actually how we can support them. It's fantastic that the speaker is, that many of members from this place are actually helping directly. And it's vital that people on the ground do see that work and see how it's benefiting them. As I said earlier, though, in conclusion, it's not for us to tell the people of Burma how to run their country. It's not for us to run their legal system. However, we are critical friends. We should be raising points where we can. Imagine if it's on the other foot. We have President Obama, people complaining about the possibility of President Obama telling us over here about what we might do in the EU referendum. Frankly, I'm more interested in looking at how Narendra Modi came over here and actually extend the hand of friendship and talked about partnerships and about working together as equals. And these are opportunities that we have in Burma looking forward. There are going to be opportunities for further development, for further work from DFID and Parliament, but also, hopefully in the future, opportunities for trade. It was fantastic to see Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon, when I was over there, as part of a regional tour, coming to the to Yangon to actually talk about opportunities for transport infrastructure.
I'm grateful to him. I've enjoyed listening to his speech, and it's absolutely right about the rule of law, but Burma, unfortunately, comes in the top or bottom quartile, depending on which way you like to put it, of being one of the most corrupt countries in the world. And while it is not up to our country to tell Burma how to run itself, how does the honourable member think we can best help them get rid of the corruption?
I would look at examples like Bangladesh, which is, again, is not a perfect country by any stretch of the imagination, and look at how they've moved on from their corrupt state. And things are starting to open up there in terms of opportunities for business as people actually realise that corruption at that level is unsustainable. Burma has been looking to China, has had a lot of investment coming in from China, but they actually realise now, they're starting to realise cheap isn't always best, and frankly China doesn't have much regard for the country, it has regard for the dollar and the chat. And so they are looking to the West for investment, and they know in order to do that, they're going to have to open up, they're going to have to tackle corruption, and hopefully we can help them do that. Just very much in conclusion, I'd like to thank on the record, Andrew Patrick, our ambassador there, Gavin McGilvery, the head of DFID over there, and Kevin Mackenzie from the British Council. But I would also like to thank the many, many different people that I met who spoke so eloquently, so articulately, and that gives me such hope for the future, knowing that there's a new generation of people coming through. As I said, Burma, and the politicians, Daw Suu, and her colleagues have been elected with their own vision. I hope we're going to be able to support them, but let them deliver their vision as well. See how we can help, see how we can support them, get in and support them as partners, as people who want to be able to trade, support, work in a geopolitical sense in that part of Asia as well, that really important part of Southeast Asia. And for that, I'd welcome the Minister's remarks when he sums up, and I'm looking forward to a very constructive debate this morning. Thank you.
The question